Welcome to the Sent from Disneyland podcast.
Here age relives fond memories of the past.
If it's your first time joining us, welcome. On this episode, we'll take a journey into the past and explore Disneyland and Disneyland history with mementos, snapshots, and postcards sent from Disneyland from 1955 to the present. Today, I'm starting off by thanking my patrons from patreon.com. You can join and receive mail from my desk or from my Disneyland trips. Special thanks to Random Olive, the first patron to this podcast, and to the e-ticket patrons Tania, Eric Daniels, Joe Gamble, Scott Booker, Monica Seitz Vega, Russ Romano, Michael and Christina Cross, Scott Cagle, and Sheila Harry. C-ticket patrons Serious Inquiries Only, Debbie Weinstein, Jennifer Schneep, Grace Coate, Brian Crawford, Ben and Noel Bruning, Patty Wolin, Angela Reynolds, and Aaron Moran. B-ticket patrons Jeff and Paige Orton, and Joshua, and Inexorable Tosh Bell. And the A-ticket patrons, Elise Sharp, Zealot Infinity, Alexis Robles, Maggie and Henry Byers, the Disney Rewind podcast, Angel DeBlock, and the All Aboard podcast. You can also sign up for my new newsletter for a chance to get some postcards delivered by the USPS to your mailbox. I am your host, your post-host Clocky, and today we have 2 postcards sent from Disneyland. The front of our first postcard has a horse-drawn streetcar. You can see City Hall in the background and the Emporium. On the top of the streetcar, there's a sign that reads, Fare 10 cents. On the back it reads, The Main Street Trolley. Dobbin stands patiently while the conductor of Main Street's trolley counts his fares before heading to the plaza at the other end of Disneyland's Main Street. It's postmarked July 15, 1957, with an Anaheim Centennial, 1857-1957, cancel, and a 2-cent red Jefferson postage stamp, Scott number 1033. I assume they visit the park on Sunday, July 14, 1957, when park hours were from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. The weather was a high of 88 and a low of 58. Park attendance that day was 19,019. It's addressed to Mrs. Pauline Wield of Paradise, California. It reads, Saturday. Dear Mom, as you can see from the postmark, we are down south. Disneyland is nice, lots of walking, and you could spend plenty of money. However, it is worth seeing. Expect to be home in a few days, and we'll see Sherry about getting by your way. Love, R. An opening day attraction, the horse-drawn streetcar is still in operation today. In fact, until May of 1956, all the Main Street vehicles were powered by live horses. In addition to the streetcar, there was a horse-drawn fire wagon, which is now permanently parked in the firehouse on Main Street, and a horse-drawn surrey, which occasionally appears in some of the vintage postcards on this podcast. The history of the horse-drawn streetcar, or horse car, dates back to around the mid-1800s. These streetcars were added to cities to help public transportation. Prior to the streetcar, stagecoaches would either be hired or would run a specific route through the city. The rails allowed for a smoother ride, plus added capacity, as the metal wheels against the metal rail gave less resistance than a wheel on a dirt or stone roadway. One of the first horse cars in the United States was in New Orleans in 1832. Horse cars were eventually phased out of U.S. cities by 1926. It was costly to keep the horses, as you'd need around 10 horses per car to keep the operation going all day. Plus, in the late 1800s, an electric streetcar was introduced, using overhead wires and a wheel at the end of a pole to connect electricity to the vehicle. Since Main Street USA was designed to have a turn-of-the-century look of a small American town, the horse-drawn streetcar is a natural fit. There are only a dozen horse-drawn streetcars in use today. 3 of them are at Disney parks, Disneyland, Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World, and in Disneyland Paris. Great news! Enfield Post is back up on Etsy. Grabbing some vintage stamps is a great way to plus your mail, whether you're trying to match the color of your postcard or envelope or adding a themed stamp to the back of your mail. Be sure to check out Enfield Post. You can head over to enfieldpost.com and explore all the different vintage stamps you can use on your next card or letter. That's ENFIELDPOST on Instagram and enfieldpost.com for your wedding and vintage postage needs. Enfield Post is the official postage stamp sponsor of the Sent from Disneyland podcast. The front of our next postcard has a horse-drawn streetcar parked in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle. You can see guests taking photos with Winnie the Pooh, and if you look closely in the background, you can see the wishing well. On the back it reads, Sleeping Beauty Castle, Fantasyland, A horse-drawn streetcar arrives at the end of Main Street where guests disembark for Sleeping Beauty Castle, gateway to the wonderful land of fantasy, where dreams actually come true for the young at heart. It's postmarked July 25th, 1973, with a Lee Vining cancel and a 6-cent Progress in Electronics Marconi Spark Coil Marconi Spark Gap postage stamp, Scott number 1500. I assume they visit the park on July 21st, 1973, when park hours were from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. The weather was a high of 76 and a low of 59. It's addressed to Riley Groom of Willowbrook, California. It reads, Tuesday. Riley, your number wasn't in the Anaheim phone book, so didn't get a chance to call. Went to Knott's Berry Farm too. Then on to Kingsburg and Fresno. Now in Yosemite Park. We saw Carlsbad Cavern and White Sands earlier, also Grand Canyon. Headed home by Saturday evening. Julie Fitzgerald. Another trolley that was in Disneyland was in Mickey's Toontown. The Jolly Trolley opened with the newly added land on January 24th, 1993. This was the first attraction you would see walking into Toontown. The red and yellow trolleys were intended to look like a cartoon version of the trolley cars from the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. They had a toy look, with a wind-up key on the top of the back half of the ride vehicle. In the 1993 Disneyland map, it's listed with a description that reads, Take a wacky, wonderful, rolling romp through downtown Toontown. On this ride, there's some zany rocking, but it's more fun than walking. There's even an image on the page of the attraction, with Goofy and Gadget riding on one of the trolleys. The Jolly Trolley was not meant to be transportation. It was a complete loop from the center of the land, and would head to the two opposite ends of Toontown, both to the neighborhood street where Mickey and Minnie's houses are located, and to the other end where you can see the entrance to Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin. The trolley would circle the two water fountains of Toontown. Both fountains were removed during the most recent update to Toontown. Finally, guests would be dropped off back in the center of Toontown. The trolley could hold up to 10 guests and would take about 10 minutes to complete the 800-foot track. While in motion, the trolley would bounce and sway while guests sat on either side of the trolley, facing out with no seatbelt or lap bar. The attraction was suspended in December of 2003. The trolley was then stationary on the track after December, and the station or the queue was used as a bench for guests. Then the benches were removed to create a Disney Vacation Club kiosk. The trolley station, trolley tracks, and the trolley were completely removed during the last renovation of Toontown. The trolley is still backstage at Disneyland. I've seen some cast members take photos with the ride vehicle. When I stay at the 4 Point Sheraton across the highway from the park, I can usually get a glimpse of the trolley, sitting back near where they store the parade floats. It's amazing that the trolley has been on property for over 30 years, but was only a functioning attraction for the first 10. This incoming postcard is sponsored by the Art Throwdown. Art Throwdown, or ATD, is an online craft hour on Instagram, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific. Be sure to check out Monday's ATD, which is usually hosted by paper artist Russ Romano. I've seen many amazing art projects, learned about awesome postmarks, postage stamp history, and a lot more on different episodes. It's great to stop in for an hour to watch someone craft or design something unique. Each host brings something a little different to each show. I'll list some of the regular hosts, or you can follow Russ Romano 2021 on Instagram. The front of my incoming postcard has an artist rendering of the Mascot Hall of Fame. You can see people walking towards the building, and the large mascot holding an image of Mr. Met. It's postmarked November 27, 2023, with a fuzzy cancel and a U.S. flag, Freedom Forever postage stamp, Scott number 5787. It reads, 11/7/23, Clocky. Had so much fun at Dave Raymond's boot camp for ABC News. I can't wait for the day that Hootie is inducted. This STEM museum is amazing. Plus, they have a Build-A-Bear, Brooke and Hootie. Thank you so much for the postcard, Brooke and Hootie. I just watched a segment about Dave Raymond and saw some of the Hall of Fame. I don't make it out to Whiting, Indiana, where the Hall of Fame is, but I'll definitely have this place on my list to visit if I'm ever nearby. Thanks for listening to Sent from Disneyland. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and tell your friends. It would be helpful to share your favorite episode to a friend or on social media. There are over 200 to choose from. It would also help to leave a 5-star rating and comment at whatever podcast platform you use. If you'd like to support the show financially, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/SentFromDisneyland. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Sent From Disneyland, or on Twitter at Sent From Disney. For questions and comments, send me a postcard addressed to Sent from Disneyland, P.O. Box 44, Hood, California, 95639. This podcast is not affiliated with Disney, the United States Postal Service, or any post office or Disney properties. Opinions expressed on this podcast belong to its host and guests of the Sent from Disneyland podcast.